right off with. So, welcome everyone. This is Kelly Dumar. I'm so happy to be here as your host for the monthly Journal of Expressive Writing featured author and open mic. I am so grateful to our journal founder and editor, Jennifer Minotti. And I'll invite Jen to say a few words of hello. But because we take the summer off, gives us a little break, and we're really looking forward to being back here with our community of people who come here regularly to read their poetry, their prose in the open mic, listen to the feature, ask questions, make comments. We just try to keep the chat room really going with positive affirmation and support for the people who read. And also feel free to ask questions as Catharina reads. But feel free to also say who you are, where you're from. How did you find your way here to the Journal of Expressive Writing open mic? Have you been published here? Jen will be putting, if you're on the open mic readers list, Jen will be putting a link to anything that you've written for the journal that has been published so that people can find out more about you. You're welcome to share information about your own website, books that you have. Think we're getting on top of that. And you're welcome to share that also in the chat room. If somebody is reading and just says something that just really hits you with its beauty or its truth, are you requesting to record, Catharina? To your computer? Okay, I don't know why it gave me that little thing. If it really hits you in the heart, then feel free to say so in the chat room. I'm going to take a moment for everyone to hear a hello from our founder and editor of the journal, Jen Minotti. Jen, welcome. So good to be back here with you. Do you want to say good evening to everybody?
Yes, thank you, Kelly. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I just want to say hi. It's we missed you from taking some time off this summer, but I couldn't be more thrilled to start off this school year with Catharina COENEN and her new book. It's fabulous. So I'll be putting links in into the chat, and there's a discount that you can receive by purchasing it, and yeah, just really thrilled to be back. And thank you so much, everyone, for being here.
Thank you, Jen. Thanks for making this whole community possible with all the work that you do, sending out announcements and publishing the journal. We really appreciate it. Welcome, Karen Stanley. I see your face, and now I just remembered that I promised you I'd send you the link in case you hadn't received it, and apparently you found your way in here, so I'm so glad. Karen Edwards, hello to you. All right, now I want to just say a couple of words about the open mic. Jen, have you put in the chat room yet the list of readers?
I have not, but I can.
Great. If you would, that would be great, because then everybody could see and double check whether or not they're listed. And just let me say before I introduce Catharina, just a couple of words about the open mic. 3 minutes or less. We ask you to keep your reading really, really tight. It's helpful to record it in advance. We want to make sure we have room for everybody and that we're able to end our session at time, which is 8:30. So we usually can do that. But if you go over 3 minutes and I have to interrupt you, please don't take it personally. I'm just going to let you know, I'm sorry, but that's over 3 minutes. And please come back and read again next time, and don't worry about it. But just to let you know that we do limit it to the 3 minutes. The other thing I want you to do is unmute just before we're going to call your name. So it's great if everybody but the speaker stays muted. And we're going to give you a spotlight when it is your turn. And we'll be reading the names out loud. Did you post them yet? Yeah, here we are. Okay, good. So you'll see there are 15 readers signed up tonight. If you look over in the chat room, you know who you are. Just double check to make sure. Sometimes people get confused and they think they're signing up for the open mic, but they actually didn't by mistake. If you are certain that you planned to present in the open mic and that you might have confused your sign up, then direct message Jen, preferably not me, because I won't have time to read it. And also, if you would please make sure and make sure your name, your little Hollywood Square name, mine says Kelly Dumar, says the name that you signed up to read in. Like, let's say you signed on in your kids or your husband's or your boss's Zoom account. Change your name if you could so that Jen knows you're here. And then we know what's going on our reading list and we don't spend a lot of time looking and searching for you. Hello, Beverly. Great to see you too. So, okay. All right, I think I covered the open mic. So what we're going to do is I'm going to introduce Catharina, and then we are going to hear her read from her fabulous award-winning new book, Unexploded Ordnance. And if you don't have a copy, you're going to learn exactly how to find a copy by ordering it even on a 25% discount from the publisher. Jen's going to make all that information available to you. This is an amazing award-winning book of essays. And so I think by the time you begin to hear Catharina read, you're going to be intrigued and you want to get yourself, get your hands on a copy of this. We hope that you will. It's available through the publisher and probably will be available through other distribution later on. But as I said, it's brand new. So get your 25% discount. I want to introduce Catharina now. Just say that I've gotten to know her over the years as part of our membership and leadership in the International Women's Writing Guild, and found her to be just an incredible person to get to know. But now in 2023, her book won the 2023 Restless Books Prize for New Immigrant Writing. So, I mean, that's really an amazing honor. And the publication, the prize, in addition to some money, was publication of this book that she is going to be reading from tonight. Now, what Catharina says herself about Unexploded Ordnance is, when I first moved to the US from Germany for graduate school in botany, I was shocked by the ease with which many Americans joked about Nazis. Yet I could not explain that the word shook me to the core. Claiming space for my emotions or for my family history felt inconceivable in the face of the suffering that my grandparents' generation had caused. 10 years ago, I took my first creative nonfiction class. I meant to write about plants, but every piece I wrote twisted itself into stories about my mother's and my grandmother's experiences during World War II. The linked essays in Unexploded Ordnance examine how fascism, genocide, silence, and the bombs of World War II shaped 3 generations of women in my Catholic German family and my life as a queer first-generation immigrant. Now, I want to say what the judges said about why they chose Unexploded Ordnance as the winner for this prize. What happens to the body after trauma? To the bodies of those descended from trauma? What becomes of desire that has been subsumed? These are the questions that arise from the staggering collection of essays, one that brilliantly examines the legacy and inheritance of trauma in 3 generations of German women. The hurts and silences, ambitions and dignities of grandmothers, aunts, mothers, and daughters take center stage, giving voice to a range of experiences that feel both timely and timeless. As Catharina reflects on how she came to her own queer identity, she does not shrink from examining her family's past, sharing stories that implicate the suffering caused by her grandparents' Nazi ties as a powerful act against secret keeping. Unexploded Ordnance invites the reader to think, perhaps for the first time, about the intersection of science, immigration, choice, and memory. Catharina's perspective as a biologist informs how she brings the personal and political together, allowing the reader to see as a scientist, but through an artist's gaze. And yet beneath the strength of her voice, frank, tender, wise, there is a way in which her expertise disappears into the work itself. Catharina, it says, we are all beneficiaries of her courage and determination. Thanks for being here with us tonight. Catharina, welcome.
All right. Well, Kelly, that was stunning. Stunning to sit through, I have to tell you. So thank you so much for inviting me. Thanks everyone for coming. I am so thrilled to have you here. I'm so thrilled that this is my very first reading event for this book. Kelly and I have worked together on open mics for many, many years. And so this really feels like home to me. And I am really, really touched that so many of you have shown up, especially my Guild sisters. And also I see some of my colleagues and friends here. And also welcome to Sophie, who is the next winner of the Restless Books Prize for New Immigrant Writing. So we haven't met yet, but I look forward to that. Thanks, Sophie. Kelly has already said anything that I could say about the book. I wanted to just briefly see if I can share the cover with you. Let me see here. There we go. When the designer came up with this cover, I was really touched because it really is about sort of like the long shadows of the past. And Unexploded Ordnance, of course, is a military term. It refers to bombs and other explosives that are left over after a war. And Germany is full of unexploded bombs from airplanes that are still sitting in the soil and that could explode at any moment. And so some excursions in the book are about the efforts to try and remove that and how it's a multi-century effort, really. And so that became a metaphor for what I was doing here, trying to kind of diffuse the things that we don't talk about or haven't learned to talk about. And I also was really glad that she put these two women or girls on the cover who have these shadows. This might be my grandmother and my mother holding hands here, or it might be my mother and her older sister, who also plays a big role in this book and who held my mother's hand a lot throughout the war. So at the end of the war, my mother was 5. My grandmother had 2 toddlers and a newborn baby. And so the stories in here all grew around anecdotes that I heard from my mother, but mostly from my grandmother, my mother's mother, while I was growing up. And so the writing process really coalesced around, somehow I felt like I'd been left with this legacy of things that my grandmother had told me, but couldn't talk to my mother about. And so it felt like that those stories kind of skipped a generation. And the piece that I'm going to read today kind of touches on how that skipping might have come about. The other thing that I wanted to say about this book before we start is I wanted to show you the table of contents. And I was really happy that my publisher let me do this. So on the left side here are the titles of the essays that I wrote. And on the right side are German words that I struggle with translation of those German words in very short pieces that are interspersed between the essays. And so it's really like the stitching together of two cultures and of two ways of looking at the world. Here's the more analytical side, and here's the side of trying to understand through story. Okay, now I need to figure out how to stop sharing. Stop sharing. There we go. Okay. So what the piece I'm going to read the piece itself, and I'm going to read the little definition that starts it off before then. And so the definition is, the word is Feuerlöschteich, noun, masculine. Literally, that means fire extinguishing pond. During the war, ponds were sometimes dug by hand in response to wartime regulations. Sometimes they were bomb craters left open to collect water for fire crews throughout the war. Ponds that persist post-war are often contaminated with nitrate, heavy metals, phosphorus, and toxic aromatic compounds because the Allies dumped confiscated German bullets and grenades into any open water to render them unusable. Where these ponds were filled in after the war, the buried ammunitions still create hazardous and costly surprises during construction projects. In March of 2017, a 72-year-old Munich woman had to go to the press and then to court to force the government to help her pay an astronomical bill for removal of 20,000 pounds of grenades, explosives, and toxic phosphorus discovered in her yard. When her family bought the property 67 years earlier, it had been an inconspicuous, flat green lawn. Holes, dug to put out fires during war, were made to swallow unexploded ordnance. What was meant to fill in holes left after war became unrecognizable as dangerous ground. The day my mother found Adolf Hitler was filled with springtime sun, an outpouring of unseasonable warmth upon the villages of Upper Swabia. Children, even those who do own shoes, run barefoot in lengthening grass, buoyed by a rare reprieve from endless chores. After listening with grim intensity to the drone of the Wehrmachtsbericht emanating from the radio, mothers and grandparents in Otterswang's 24 farms exchange silent glances, then send their kids to play outside. So Otterswang is the little village that my grandmother ended up in with her two little girls and her baby after fleeing the bombs in Essen, where she lived before. The bigger children vanish in a flash. Little Anna, that's her mom, my mom, bites her lips as she squints after them. Her big sister Elfriede, too, has run off with her friends from school. Turning her back on the road down which the other children have disappeared, Anna swallows hard and wanders alone among stables and sheds. The dairy cows have not been turned out to pasture after the morning's milking. Balancing on the lintel to the byre, Anna watches whiskered jaws perform their grinding waltz on last year's hay. Dark eyes gaze back at her, round and patient, but she remembers the wet rasp of their long tongues as they explore backs of knees or crooks of elbows for salty sweat. She will not walk down the stable aisle. When the cat drops down the ladder from the hayloft, his back body curling and uncurling itself into a descending triplet of musical notes, she turns and runs across the barnyard to the pond, sending the ducks onto the green water in a low-voiced cacophony of private chatter, their conversations no more comprehensible than those of the adults at home. Anna's eyes follow them longingly. Ducklings, unlike children, are born already knowing how to swim. As the ducks approach the middle of the pond, a flash of white hooks Anna's gaze. She lifts her hand to shade her eyes against sparkling water wrinkled by paddling feet, catches another flash, then another. Whatever is out there with them is much whiter than the ducks. Whiter than paper, Anna thinks. Whiter even than bleached laundry flapping on a line. White as the stucco angels in St. Oswald, Otterswang's Baroque village church. Of course, an angel from St. Oswald Church would not be floating in the pond. But what if it is? The clarity of calcined white shines out again, stark and ethereal, against the water's green. The first step into the shallows feels cool but not icy, not threateningly cold. The next two steps wash chilly wetness over Anna's knees. She yanks her dress up with both hands. Is this angel worth ruining her clothes? Her arms and legs shudder with the memory of slaps raining down on them, their former landlady's punishment for mud stains and rips in the brittle reused fabric of her skirts. In Biberach, where they lived before, there was no choice. All children dove into the dirt every time planes thundered low and fast over the neighborhood. Sometimes bullets whined and thudded anyway. But there is nothing to be afraid of here. Only another flash of white as the drifting object bobs in the wake of the ducks. Anna takes another step, then another. She pulls her hemline up to shoulder height as frigid water circles from her belly button to her back. Bunching fabric in one fist and stretching it high above her head, she steps again, her toes in search of purchase in the mud. She reaches with her other hand, inches the floating thing toward her with her fingertips. Wading ashore, she squeezes the object tight against her chest as she stumbles back to the farm's tiny annex house. She needs to take her catch home right now to show it to Mother, because Mother loves beautiful things. Often, too often, she brings home flowers from the plant nursery down the road where she works. Anna has to bite down anger on those nights. Delight in arranging lupins, larkspur, or bobbing globes of peonies make Mother forget that the nursery owner once again showed his appreciation for Lotte's work. Lotte is my grandmother. By handing her flowers from an overflowing bed instead of giving her some food. The stone tiles in the entrance to the annex chill Anna's naked soles. But the wooden steps to their own two rooms on the second floor reassure her feet with roughness as she climbs. Having no hand free, she nudges the door to the living room open with her shoulder, then stands dumbstruck in the unexpected heat. The little pot-bellied stove blazes orange. The room's small windows, one above the sofa where Grandpa Willem sleeps at night, and the other by the table where they eat when Mother cooks a meal for them instead of shooing them over to the farmhouse kitchen with the cat that insists on rubbing against Anna's legs. Gape wide to dissipate the scorching air. But Mother isn't cooking. Anna can't see what she is doing sitting at the table, hunched over a box and several fat books. As Anna pads toward the table, something smooth and sharp-edged sticks to the bottom of her foot. She tries to scrape it off, left sole against right shin, struggling to balance while she clenches the heavy sodden angel against her chest. Snippets of glossy paper blink on the floor by Mother's chair. Rip go her hands, dislodging a photograph from the album. Snip go the scissors, setting another clip adrift from lap to floor. Sweat worms down Anna's neck. She meant to present her catch with a flourish. Look at what I found for you. But now her voice sticks in her throat. She slides the wet angel onto the table next to her mother's books and cardboard box. The snip-snip of the scissors stops. The dim room dulls the angel's alabaster sheen to a sodden gypsum gray. Oh no. Mother's voice does not sound at all like Anna has imagined it would, all flat, without a trace of lupin purple joy. It was in the pond, Anna says. She licks her lips. It was drowning. Drowning, Mother's voice repeats with no tone at all. Anna's eyes follow her mother's from the table upward to an empty nail on the wall above the stove and back down to the tabletop. Yes, Mother says still tonelessly. I suppose I should have known he wouldn't drown. Color rushes across Mother's cheeks as she shakes her head. Chair legs scrape against floorboards. Then her steps fade down the stairs. Anna now can see that the angel is just a face, shaped from a plaster in an oval plate, not an entire figurine. Its nose and mustache seem familiar. Her eyes wander to the nail on the wall. She suddenly remembers that none of the angels in St. Oswald Church wear mustaches. Is that why this one had been banished from the church? Is that why Father, when he visits between surgeries in the military hospital, stands in silence, his arm in its plaster shoulder cast sticking out at an odd angle, and stares sternly at this angel's face? The baby moans. Anna glances at the crib. Little Alfred's arm, naked and moist with sweat, rises and drops back down, once, twice. When footsteps creak back up the stairs, Anna turns. Her eye finds the hammer dangling from her mother's hand. Step back, mother says. Will she pound in another nail? If the angel on the table is the one that used to hang here, then maybe one nail was not enough to keep it from flying out the window and falling in the pond. Anna takes a step backwards, her eyes glued to the plaster cast. All the way back, mother says. Get on the sofa and put your face in the pillow. There is no give in the voice, no room for questions. It is the voice from long ago and far away, the voice that tells Anna to hold and run as a hand yanks her from sleep and down 3 flights of stairs, the voice that knows the bombs are coming down. Anna's legs do what it says. The sofa's leather grabs her shins, her face prickles in the pillow's velour. The hammer's smash is followed by the baby's wail, and then each time the baby pauses to catch his breath, the dull clink of plaster shards and paper scraps, the swish of broom straw over unwaxed boards. Anna's face turns from the pillow's scent of Grandpa Willem towards the sofa's back to take a sip of air. Her fingers pry bangs from her damp forehead, then scrabble at the stubborn paper triangle still stuck to her left foot. She peels the snippet off and curls herself around it, her back a shield against her mother's eyes. Cradling the glossy scrap inside her hand, she tilts it into the sun that slants in through the tiny window. The scrap is part of a photograph, showing just the shoulder of a man severed by the scissors snip. Above the dismembered shoulder is another picture framed and hung upon the wall. The man in the framed picture wears his hair parted severely on the right, just like the angel. And there, under the familiar nose, is the angel's small mustache. As Anna stares, the wailing baby draws a breath. Shards and paper skitter from the dustpan's metal. The stove door jolts her body with its clang. This is not how my mother told the story. When I ask her if she cried when my grandmother smashed the plaster plate, she says she didn't because her mother's distress seemed so much larger than her own. When I ask what she thought Lotte was so upset about, she says she didn't know it then, but now she thinks it must have been because Lotte realized how easily her daughter could have drowned. I've never pressed Mom to imagine other reasons why, on this day in May of 1945, her mother's initial shock did not dissolve into relief, a hug accompanied by tears. A 5-year-old's memories are fragments, a kaleidoscope of moments, not a logical sequence of events in which the Wehrmachtsbericht predicts when French troops will arrive in the villages of surrounding Biberach, and frightened women rush to destroy any busts or photographs that might incriminate the family. Many details of that day, the landlady, the iron stove, the sofa, the wooden stairs, the lupins, and the cat, appeared in snippets over decades of tea time anecdotes. But my mother, who until a decade or so ago could not look at any films or books that touched upon the war, never connected finding Hitler in the pond to the storm her own mother saw brewing on that sunny day. Instead of talking about soldiers or French tanks, she tells me about the dream in which she drives over the black cat. My younger nephew gets out of her car, picks up the cat, and lays it on the seat between them. She wakes up screaming as its fur touches her skin. The scientist in me pores over census data, weather records, maps, the movements of French troops through Upper Swabia. But early childhood is coded not in words and dates, but in sound and taste and touch. A hollow sinking in the belly, a quiver in the knees. And so I found the curve of 5-year-old Anna's spine, the turning away from her mother to look at a picture on the leather sofa, not in my mother's telling, but in the way she hung up the phone 100 times whenever Oma Lotte began to speak about the war. Mother, I don't have time for that right now. A generation of wartime children slammed down the receiver, refused to look anywhere except ahead. A generation of parents, having brought the world to smoking rubble around everybody's ankles, smashed the busts and burned the pictures, hid Mein Kampf behind the linens in the closet, and never learned how to explain. Only in Oz do munchkins dance and sing after the house has crushed the wicked witch. In Germany, the clang of the oven door left nothing but silence reverberating in children's ears. The pond my mother sought with such urgency during our visit to the farm in Otterswang on a last road trip with my grandmother over 30 years ago was nowhere to be found. One of the Lang's children told us it had been filled in soon after the war. If anything was discovered on its muddy bottom after it was drained, Mr. Lang failed to mention what it was. And so, like a preschooler clutching a half-dissolving necklace of sticky plastic cows and ducks and cats, here I am, 70 years after my mother pulled Adolf Hitler from the pond, holding out the story I have strung to explain why she, the woman who picked up spiders by a leg to carry them outside, who asked if she might pet the iguana at the reptile zoo, recoiled in horror when my sister and I brought her a homeless cat, and always declared that the water was too cold whenever we asked her to swim. I'm going to stop here.
Wow. Wow, wow. That was amazing. Thank you, Katerina. I haven't had a chance to look in the chat room yet to see what people are saying. And I want to talk to you a little bit before I do. And I'm guessing that people in the chat room are just talking, feeling gobsmacked. What a riveting story, what riveting writing, what riveting reading you gave. I'm a little bit speechless at how beautifully crafted this really provocative and interesting content is. And I am so curious about how you did it. The construction of this point of view of the child 2 generations back from you feels so authentic to the reader. That I'm just like surprised also. I think you said you took your first creative writing class, creative nonfiction class, how many years ago?
Oh, it's now been like 13 years.
Okay. All right.
This was one of the first pieces I wrote, and really, there is something that I needed to do. Like there was a need to inhabit my mother's body in order to understand my own. So the book starts out by a description of some of the fears that I grew up with, like the things that would give me panic attacks, and that made absolutely no sense. And I only began to understand where those had come from when I tried to understand what my mother's body had gone through. Mm-hmm. And so there was something in me that needed to not just know about these stories, but live these stories. And that's, I think, Jen will understand that that's what expressive writing does, right? It puts us into someone else's body. And that's really a technique that we tend to associate with fiction more than nonfiction. But those borderlines are becoming more permeable. And I feel like we are lucky to live in a time when sort of genre constraints are not what they used to be, and we have way more permission to experiment. And so I didn't know what this was going to be when I started writing it. I just knew that I had these stories that were sort of like marinating in my body, and I needed to put them on the page so that I could be free of them.
So that we could be recipients of them and engage with them. Thank goodness. Oh no, Mother's voice does not sound at all like Anna has imagined it would. All flat, without a trace of lupin purple joy. You have such a facility with metaphor and images. This is such poetic prose that I'm, let alone, I guess, the content is so fresh and original. The point of, what is being revealed and talked about, Catharina, in this is enough to make interest. But your prose style does so much more with it, that it's really, it's stunning. So it's so engaging because we experience the idea of the angel being found in the pond. And so gradually you give us the identity, so you transition us from reverence to horror in the same way that I can only imagine any sort of hero who falls spectacularly and justifiably from grace, that process of letting someone's true persona be revealed. So that's really quite amazing, the way you reveal the casting off of Hitler in such a poetic and powerful and symbolic way. I'm just, this is amazing. I want you to talk about this for a minute. And so I found the curve of 5-year-old Anna's spine, the turning away from her mother to look at a picture on the leather sofa, not in my mother's telling, but in the way she hung up the phone 100 times whenever Oma Latte began to speak about the war. Mother, I don't have time for that right now. You're really communicating this particular aspect of the story through embodying Anna. And this is what you were just talking about. Give us an idea, if you would, of how you approached this in the writing, how you got it on the page. Yes, you were in her body. So I'm just really curious about your craft process. And how did you trust yourself? Those are two things I'm wondering if you would touch on that. How did you trust yourself?
Yeah, so what I tried to do was to tell my grandmother's and my mother's stories. So this particular anecdote came from my grandmother, from my mother, but it didn't come to me in those words. And
Right.
And so
because you are really engaged, you're giving us entirely the child's point of view, and that,
yeah.
which is very difficult, but you're really great at it.
So I wanted to know more than she was telling me.
Yeah.
And so I felt like I had to walk the scene with her. And so I took the details that she gave me, and then I did a heck of a lot of research. The first thing that I had to do is, like, I had all these anecdotes. I didn't know when anything was happening or where. So I had to puzzle all of that together. And like, being Dr. Science, I had Excel spreadsheets in which I did that. And so, then I started reading histories, and I started, looking at pictures, and then I also started asking my mother more questions about, how things were exactly, like, the pond, right? So my mother knew that she had fished this thing from the pond, but I like the idea that this was probably a fire pond, and that's why it was gone after the war. That only struck me as I started researching the time and started understanding, wartime regulations, and started finding out about all these ponds that are either still around and poisoned, and or they've been filled in, and people don't even know that they're living on top of a former fire pond that has God knows what in the bottom. That struck me as metaphorical, but I also, it's like I've watched my mother's body, of course, growing up, and this whole thing about never going swimming with us, like she would dip a toe in, and then it was like, forget this, I'm not going in there. And I'm like, oh my God, this makes sense now, right? Because she remembered getting into this pond, but she couldn't talk about why she wouldn't go in the water, right? And interestingly, part of me kind of prodding, and I had to do it like very, very gently, right? So my grandmother died in 1997. By the time I started writing this, she was no longer available to talk to. And my mother had refused to talk all this time. And this is also in the first chapter of the book, like once she realized that I was interested in these stories and in her childhood memories, she showed up with this plastic Ziploc bag of letters that my grandfather had written from the Russian front to my grandmother. She didn't have my grandmother's letters because he had burned them. And he had also, like, I have a letter that says, burn these letters. And my grandmother burned some of them, but not all of them. And so I had this set of letters that helped me understand, because she had the envelopes. I now knew when they had lived where, as they fled from the industrial area of Germany that was getting severely bombed to southern Germany. So then I started figuring out, where they were when the pond story happened. And then Google Maps is wonderful in that it gives you an idea of the area, and you can read histories of these villages in various places. So really, it was a combination. It was a melding of feeling with my mother's body, which you do as a daughter, right? There's these things, these vibes that you get, these fears that you understand. And suddenly I was like, oh, this dream about the black cat makes complete sense, because, she told me about this cat that was like, she hated the whole idea that a cat might touch her. So this all came from that time, and it had engraved itself in her nervous system in ways that were still there, but that were not comprehensible from an adult narrative point of view. They were only understandable from, slipping into a child's mind. And so in other chapters of the book, I also do that. Like most chapters have this sort of perspective switch, like where I try to inhabit my grandmother's mind, or also another adult in the room who's like observing the scene from a particular perspective. And part of that allowed me to drive my research, because then in order to inhabit that perspective, I had to know a heck of a lot of things. And it helped me ask questions and find sources.
Katharina, you came to the US from Germany as a Fulbright scholar to attend graduate school. You teach biology at Allegheny College. This is a prize for new immigrant writing. Why did you want to come here to the US?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm gonna let my dog in. She's being annoyed. I came to the US originally on the Fulbright grant. I just didn't know what I was going to do my thesis on in Germany. And so I'm like, okay, I'll go abroad for a year, right? And so that Fulbright grant allowed me to do that. And then I ended up in Oregon, and I loved Oregon. So I stayed and did my PhD work there. The grant also meant I had to go back to Germany for at least 2 years afterwards, because it was an exchange visa that I came in on. And while I was in Germany as a postdoc, I looked around and I was like, how did I never notice that there are no female biology professors in this country? I never had one as an undergraduate. And so I asked what is going on here, and my postdoctoral advisor said, well, women want to have children. Of course, there's no female professors. And I was like, this is a problem. So I knew that such things as liberal arts colleges existed in the US. I'd never been to one, but the whole idea appealed to me. So I sent off like 3 applications and got 2 job offers and went. So essentially, it was my country's misogyny that in academic circles still persists to not to the degree that it was true 25 years ago. But yeah,
Lucky us that we were
yeah,
welcoming of you.
yeah. So that's how I came back.
Catharina, I don't know. It's breaking my heart. I want to talk to you all night. This has been so wonderful. If there has been a question in the chat room, sorry, I had to plug my computer in. Jen, could you see, was there a question in the chat room? I don't have time to scroll through, but I did want to know, was there any explicit question in the chat room?
Oh, how long did it take to put together the book as a whole?
Okay.
This is from Lisa St. John.
Okay, good. Will you answer that, please?
Yeah, 13 years. Yeah.
Well, then the accompanying question to that from me would be, how did you sustain your process with it? Because it took you 13 years. Eventually, you submitted it for this possible prize, which you won. And so how did you, because we're a community of writers.
Yeah.
And I think it's a challenge. 13 years is a long time to be working on a project. So give us the down and dirty, short and sweet. How did you sustain your passion for and belief in and discipline with this project to bring it to fruition over 13 years?
Yeah, I didn't set out to write a book. That seemed way too big. Like I didn't know how, I didn't believe, I don't think that I could do that necessarily. So what I started out writing was essays, right? And it's really the Jen Minottis of this world who made that happen for me, because I then started sending little pieces out to literary magazines. And I learned to not aim for acceptances, but to aim for submissions. I read an essay about that somewhere, that you should make your goal not to have X many essays accepted. You should make your goal to have X many submissions in a year. And so for a while, I was massively sending out work. And then eventually things got accepted here and there. And that was really the juice that it took to keep me going, to convince me that there were people out there who would want to read that. And so that is really this whole world out there of people who do this work of putting out literary magazines for no pay or next to no pay,
Right.
and keeping literature alive.
Here.
Really what we're doing for each other. And also I took workshops online. Like the pandemic came to my aid eventually, because I live in northwestern Pennsylvania, where there is really not much on offer, because it's such a rural, pretty remote area. But once there were workshops online, I suddenly had I could build writing groups. So the International Women's Writing Guild was a big, big part of keeping me going, because people there were so encouraging at the conferences. And also then once I had made some friends who would write with me throughout the year, and we kept encouraging each other. And I would say that to any writer, we tend to think of writing as this thing that you do locked away in your room, but really you need your community to keep parts of you convinced that what you're doing is not just for yourself, but that there are other people who could benefit.
Community.
Yeah.
Okay, so there have been 2 additional questions put into the chat room, Catharina, and I'm going to ask if you might have the ability to try to answer those in the chat room, only because we're running over and we have time. We want to have time for the open mic, but you'll stay till the end and
I will.
we'll have a final word with you. A stunning book. Thank you for this reading and well, for your friendship and also for showing up here too regularly at the Journal of Expressive Writing open mic and helping me and Jen with this project as you so generously do. So thank you for everybody listening. And Catharina, I'm going to let you take a peek at the chat and we're going to move now into the open mic and just thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Thank you.
All right, now it's time for me to remove my spotlight. And I am excited because now we're going to move into the open mic, but I'm going to stop the recording.